Good afternoon, I'm James Ezimoha and you're watching A News. Let's see your headlines. Air India plane bound for London crashes on takeoff at Ahmedabad airport. More than 200 people killed. The US implements partial evacuation of embassy staff in Iraq amid rising tensions in the Middle East. The TurkPA's 14th plenary session in Astana brings together high-level representatives of the Turkic world. An Air India plane headed to London has crashed into a building shortly after takeoff in Ahmedabad. According to the city's police chief, there are no survivors among the 242 people on board.
An Air India passenger plane bound for London has crashed shortly after takeoff from Ahmedabad in western India, slamming into a residential building near the airport. According to the city's police commissioner, speaking to the Associated Press, there appear to be no survivors. The Boeing 787 Dreamliner was carrying 242 people, including 11 children and 2 infants. Among the passengers were 169 Indians, 53 British nationals, 7 Portuguese and 1 Canadian. The plane went down just minutes after departure, crashing into a doctor's hostel at the BJ Medical College. Part of the aircraft landed on the dining area, and rescue workers say many medical students were caught inside. So far, more than 100 bodies have reportedly been recovered. The aircraft was a Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner, one of the most modern long-haul jets, and this is the first fatal crash involving that model since it entered service in 2011. Authorities say the plane gave a mayday call shortly after takeoff, but then disappeared from radar. Moments later, it crashed into the hostel building. While the Dreamliner has had previous issues with engines and components, it has maintained a strong safety record. However, last year, a whistleblower in the US called for all 787s to be grounded, a claim Boeing rejected. Boeing says it is working with Indian authorities and gathering more information. Following the crash, its shares fell more than 7% in early trading. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi called the tragedy heartbreaking and said rescue efforts were being fully supported. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said the images were devastating and confirmed that the UK was coordinating with Indian officials.
Ukraine's Kharkiv was once again struck by Shahed drones overnight, injuring 17 people, including at least 4 children, with serious damage to schools, homes and vehicles.
Russian drones attacked Kharkiv overnight, injuring at least 17 people, including 4 children. The city mayor says there were 11 strikes which hit the city, with a 12th that didn't detonate.
Kharkiv is under attack yet again. These were Shahed drones. 12 drones hit 3 districts. Fortunately, one of the Shaheds did not explode. We have serious damages of residential buildings.
Residential areas, educational institutions, kindergartens and infrastructure were hit by shelling. Dozens of cars were damaged, windows in schools and houses were broken.
Our dog is very sensitive to explosions. When the shooting started, the dog woke us up. We heard an incoming hum, then there was an explosion. Everything started falling down and there was a fire outside.
This follows the previous night's 9-minute assault that killed 3 people and injured more than 60 others. The drones targeted residential neighbourhoods, damaging homes, schools and vehicles and sparking fires. Ukrainian officials condemned the attacks as deliberate targeting of civilians and called on the international community to increase pressure on Russia to stop the violence. Previously, Moscow has always denied targeting civilians.
NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte has criticized Russia's peace negotiations tactics as unproductive. Rutte made the comment in Rome ahead of Ukraine-focused Weimar Plus talks. He pointed to Moscow's repeated use of historical arguments to shift blame onto Ukraine. Welcomed by Italian Foreign Minister Antonio Tajani, Rutte joined his counterparts from 6 key European nations to discuss transatlantic security and ongoing support for Kyiv. Leaders from across Southeast Europe have traveled to the Ukrainian port city of Odessa on Wednesday, a city repeatedly targeted by Russian missile strikes. This comes as a show of solidarity for Ukraine.
Слово має президент України Володимир Зеленський.
Welcome everybody.
For the first time, leaders from across Southeast Europe gathered in war-scarred Odessa to send a unified message. Ukraine is not alone. And for Serbian President Alexander Vučić, it was his first ever visit since Russia's full-scale invasion began in 2022. Leaders from 12 countries reaffirmed their support for Ukraine's sovereignty and European future.
Odessa is a very important city for all of us, and not just a symbol of southern Ukraine. It's a crossroads between northern and southern Europe, so between the Balkans and the Caucasus, and between European stability and the threats to undermine it. And Odessa has always been a gateway, and today it stands at a gateway to our shared security.
The leaders signed a joint declaration which demands Russia's full withdrawal, an end to hostilities and peace. It also urges the international community to stop all forms of aid to Moscow's war effort. But Vučić stood apart. While reaffirming Serbia's respect for Ukraine's territorial integrity and offering to help with post-war recovery, he did not sign the declaration, objecting to the call for sanctions on Russia. Belgrade has, however, condemned Moscow's policies in the United Nations and expressed support for Ukraine.
Serbia will always remain very faithful to UN Charter, international public law, which includes our support to territorial integrity to UN-recognized countries.
All eyes now on whether the summit will deliver more than just symbolism and bring Ukraine any closer to peace.
German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius has made an unannounced visit to Kyiv. He is set to meet with Ukrainian officials to discuss continued military support from Germany, as well as potential industrial cooperation. Germany is the second largest supporter of Ukraine after the United States, having provided over 40 billion euros in aid so far. Questions about the future of US support have increased pressure on Europe to take greater responsibility. Pistorius' visit has caused concern in Moscow as Russia continues to accuse the West of prolonging the conflict by supplying weapons to Ukraine. US President Donald Trump's decision to deploy troops to Los Angeles has ignited political and public backlash as protests over immigration raids continue.
Large crowds gathered again on Wednesday evening in downtown Los Angeles for a peaceful protest that later spilled into the city's streets. Carrying banners, posters and flags, demonstrators chanted slogans and listened to speeches before marching in unison through nearby streets.
Are you ready to stay in the streets? Yeah! I want to say to each and every one of you, you are not alone. The world is watching Los Angeles.
Wednesday marked the 6th consecutive day of protests in Los Angeles over President Donald Trump's immigration raids. While largely peaceful, some demonstrations have seen violence. Officials say the Marines and National Guard deployed at the city are tasked with protecting federal personnel and property during immigration and customs enforcement raids and related protests. Asked about reports of protests spreading to 17 other US cities, President Trump pushed back, focusing instead on the situation in Los Angeles.
I can tell you that what we have is a situation in Los Angeles that was caused by gross incompetence. They didn't have the police to handle it. The police were asking us to come in. They were very late. We had to go in to save a lot of ICE officers, as you know, who were held up. They were holed up in a building and they were being attacked. And the military went in, the National Guard went in and got them. The police weren't able, unfortunately, to move fast enough, but we moved fast enough. And while we were there, we stayed there, and we stopped tremendous destruction and death.
Meanwhile, federal prosecutors in Los Angeles have filed criminal charges against 2 protesters accused of throwing Molotov cocktails during earlier demonstrations.
We are looking at hundreds of people. We have video, we have FBI collecting video, we are collecting body cam, we're collecting social media, we're collecting everything. And we're going to take our time, we're going to identify people. They think the mask is saving them, it's not saving them.
The demonstrations began on Friday in Los Angeles and have mostly remained peaceful, concentrated within a few downtown blocks. However, confrontations with law enforcement have grown increasingly tense since the military deployment. Trump has vowed to step up deportations and bolster ICE operations, setting a daily goal of 3,000 migrant arrests, a move critics say targets vulnerable communities and fuels public unrest.
A federal crackdown in Los Angeles has exposed a sprawling Armenian organized crime network tied not only to COVID loan fraud, but also to violent power struggles, international theft rings, and attempted murder.
It started as a pandemic-era fraud. $30 million siphoned from emergency funds meant to keep American workers and businesses afloat. But investigators say the trail didn't end in spreadsheets. It led to a dark underworld of armored vehicles, hired killers, and mafia-style turf wars playing out in Los Angeles. In a sweeping pre-dawn operation, federal agents arrested 13 suspects, 12 of them Armenian-born, across multiple locations in LA. One suspect is still on the run, seized during the raids, $100,000 in cash, 14 firearms, and 3 armored vehicles. The kind of haul that paints a picture far beyond financial fraud. At the center of it all is William McGrahan. Authorities allege he masterminded a sprawling COVID loan scam, using fake tax records and bogus bank statements to create phantom businesses. He applied for $47 million and secured nearly $30 million. Investigators say part of that money was funneled overseas, with some likely returning to bankroll organized crime in the US. The cash, federal affidavits claim, helped fuel a gang war erupting in California's San Fernando Valley, a bloody feud between 2 rival Armenian factions, the Artuni Enterprise and the Armenian Crew. What followed was a descent into violence rarely seen on American streets. Drive-by shootings from black SUVs, assassination attempts tracked by drones, even a home invasion murder carried out by a hitman in a clown mask. In one shootout, a gunman was killed after storming a house. The intended target fought back with a revolver. Prosecutors say the conflict is driven by 2 alleged kingpins, Ara Artuni and Robert Armenian. Both are accused of ordering killings, kidnappings, and torture in a brutal power grab that began after notorious mob boss Armen Khazarian was deported in 2017. The Artuni crew is also linked to a high-stakes cargo theft ring. Their method? Fake trucking firms that rerouted Amazon shipments, netting more than $83 million worth of goods, from electronics to household supplies. But it didn't stop there. Federal officials say both factions ran credit card bust-out schemes, laundered money through a global network, and wired funds across borders. It's a transnational crime machine with suspected links to the Russian mafia. US Attorney Bill Asaley delivered a sharp warning. Let today's enforcement action be a warning to criminals. Our communities are not playgrounds for violence and thuggery. 13 suspects now face a barrage of federal charges: conspiracy, wire fraud, weapons offences, kidnapping, and attempted murder. Prosecutors say the case is far from closed, and more arrests are likely.
President Trump has expressed willingness to extend the 8th of July negotiation deadline for completing trade talks with countries. This comes after the positive outcome from the US-China talks earlier this week.
United States President Donald Trump has expressed satisfaction over the trade agreement reached with China. This comes as officials from both countries met in London earlier in the week, as both sides seek to de-escalate trade tensions. The talks focused on critical economic issues, including U.S. access to Chinese rare earth minerals and magnets, and China's access to U.S. technology. The U.S. president has also indicated that he would be willing to extend an 8th of July deadline for completing trade talks with countries before higher U.S. tariffs take effect, citing progress in negotiations with some 15 countries.
Would you be willing to extend the deadline for trade talks with these countries?
I would, but I don't think we're going to have that necessity. We made a great deal with China. We're very happy with it. We have everything we need, and we're going to do very well with it, and hopefully they are too. But we're dealing with Japan, we're dealing with South Korea, we're dealing with a lot of them. We're dealing with about 15 countries, but as you know, we have about 150 plus. And you can't do that. So we're going to be sending letters out in about a week and a half, 2 weeks, to countries telling them what the deal is, like I did with EU.
Meanwhile, Germany has welcomed the China-US agreement and hopes negotiations between the United States and the European Union can progress in a similar way.
I expressly welcome it. This is not at the expense of Europe. Rather, it is another conflict that has been resolved. I expressly welcome that, and I very much hope that we will also succeed in reducing and, if possible, eliminating the trade conflicts with the Americans in a similar way.
The US and China have been engaged in an economic standoff after Trump announced sweeping tariffs on imports from a number of countries earlier this year, with China being the hardest hit. The Asian country responded with retaliatory levies. The proposal from the London talks still needs the approval from both leaders before it can be implemented.
The US and China have reached a framework agreement on rare earth minerals and tech access after high-level talks in London. President Trump says the deal is done, but it still awaits final approval from both leaders. To discuss what this deal could mean for trade and geopolitics, we're joined by political analyst Anna Evans. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jason. Hello.
Now, President Trump announced that the rare earth deal with China is done, but officials describe it as a framework pending final approval. How should we interpret this difference in messaging?
Well, these are technical and often legal details, because until there is the final signing off, the final signatures that are needed legally to implement an agreement, until that precise point, we are never sure that the agreement will be implemented on the field. So that's a very particular, specific, and yet very important detail as well. But this shows, I think this standoff between China and the US has been very, very critical in terms of showing us the dangers of over-dependency. Because what we see in this framework agreement that has been discussed in London and preceded by a phone call between Xi Jinping and Trump. So this framework agreement addresses rare earths and metals that China used as a weapon against the United States tariff war. So basically what China did is that it banned 7 rare earths that are critical for the manufacturing of electric cars and other technologies, and even for bombers that the US needs. And so US Air Force and its production of cars was hindered by China's decision to suspend the exports of these rare earths. And so the United States was really in a lot of pressure to deal with this subject. In fact, we know that at least one Ford factory has suspended its production in the US because of this trade war and the suspension of exports from China, which are needed for these electrical vehicles. And so President Trump also knows that inflation is going up. And there have been warnings by multinational firms and by economists in the US that the inflation would go up as a result of the tariffs and the trade war. And China has also had some consequences in terms of exporting less to the US. And so I think this shows how critical it is to address the issue of overdependency on China regarding critical materials, and that is on the US side of the matter. But it also shows that China also has something to lose if it really bans exports, because that is a very important aspect of Chinese economy. And so basically what we are watching here is a kind of a scale down on a war that was having national security effects in the United States, but that also had some, albeit more limited, economic effects on China. And so let's see if it holds, because we really do not know very well how long this is going to be kept. We know that, for example, President Trump can easily go back on these agreements when President Trump observes or considers that there is some action on the other side that might not be well seen from the American perspective. So we really are not quite sure how long this agreement will last, but at least in the short run, it is good news because it allows for some resumption of economic activity, especially in the United States.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Jason.
After years of negotiations, the UK and European Union have struck a political agreement that could end years of disruption at the border between Gibraltar and Spain.
This strip of land at Europe's southern edge has long been a flashpoint between the UK and Spain. But now, after years of uncertainty, there's been a breakthrough on the future of the British overseas territory of Gibraltar. It's after the European Union and Britain reached an agreement on Wednesday which facilitates border crossings, which have been a contentious point since Brexit, and it ends years of political uncertainty.
We have reached a historic solution that I believe is pragmatic and gives the people of Gibraltar the certainty they need for their sovereignty and their prosperity.
The new political agreement promises frictionless movement of people and goods without physical barriers at Gibraltar's border with Spain.
We have reached the agreement we needed to reach. And that agreement was necessary for the people of Gibraltar and for the people who live around Gibraltar. But it was also something that we wanted to see because Gibraltar didn't want to leave the European Union in 2016. We are part of the continent of Europe.
At Gibraltar Airport, passport checks will now be done by Spanish and British border officials working side by side.
The complexity, the length and time that it has taken for Spanish workers moving into Gibraltar and indeed the many people leaving Gibraltar and going into Spain, that is all reduced.
The EU calls it a milestone and goes towards an improved relationship between the EU and the UK.
This agreement clearly reflects a strategic and cooperative approach aimed at strengthening our relations in the context of the UK's departure from the EU, and I would even say it reinforces a new chapter in our relationship.
And across the border, in La Linea, residents were cautiously optimistic.
Hopefully. If it is as they say, we will celebrate with champagne.
Now we, the workers, have to see if they are really effective.
For me, as a frontier worker, I hope that we have free movement and that everything goes through.
As the final legal text is drafted, it's clear that for the locals, the agreement is about more than just border control. It's about jobs, stability, and a shared future.
The AUS Security Pact, the multi-billion-dollar submarine deal between Australia, the UK and the United States, is under formal review by the Trump administration. The US says it wants to ensure the agreement aligns with its America First defense agenda.
The Trump administration has launched a formal review of AUKUS, the landmark defence pact with the UK and Australia, raising fresh doubts over America's commitment to its key allies. Signed in 2021, the £176 billion deal, or $238 billion deal, would see Australia acquire 3 nuclear-powered submarines from 2032. The country was scheduled to make a $2 billion payment in 2025 to the US to help boost its submarine shipyards. Australia's Defence Minister says reviews are expected with new governments and insists the plan remains on track.
This is a pretty normal and natural step that the American administration are taking. It's utterly consistent with what we did as a new government, what the Starmer government did as a new government. It's what governments do, and I think will do in the future. I mean, this is a multi-decade program where governments, in fact, are going to come and go. And when new governments come into place, I think you will see them undertake reviews of this kind, and that's fine. We will work very closely with the US on it, but we're really confident about the progress of AUKUS, and we're confident about how it will proceed under the Trump administration.
Speaking alongside Australia's Deputy Prime Minister, US Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth praised the solid ties between the two countries.
As strong and robust as it's ever been, and is important considering the issues we face in the region and the world. Beautiful.
The move comes as both Australia and the UK face pressure from the White House to lift military spending. Doubts are arising over whether the US can live up to its AUKUS promises amid internal challenges to its own military production. With growing global tensions, UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer declared a week ago a shift toward warfighting readiness, stressing that deterring hostile states requires visible strength and preparedness. China has criticised the pact as fueling an arms race, but for Australia it's a record defence investment and a sign that long-range deterrence is now essential in the Indo-Pacific.
Rising tensions in the Middle East have led the United States to begin evacuating non-essential diplomatic staff from several embassies. The move comes amid fears of a wider conflict involving Iran, Israel, and the ongoing war in Gaza. Meantime, global markets react with a sharp oil price rise.
The United States is preparing a partial evacuation of its embassy in Iraq and allowing military dependents to leave several locations in the Middle East due to heightened security risks, according to US and Iraqi sources. The move comes amid heightened fears of a broader conflict involving Iran, Israel, and their respective allies. US President Donald Trump confirmed Wednesday that US personnel are being relocated from the region, which he described as potentially dangerous, and reiterated Washington's firm stance against Iran acquiring nuclear weapons. The State Department has initiated a drawdown of staff at the US Embassy in Iraq's capital, Baghdad, authorizing the departure of all non-essential personnel. In an updated travel advisory, the department cited heightened regional tensions as the reason for the decision. The evacuations come as the region remains volatile after 18 months of war in Gaza, fueling fears of a broader conflict involving the US, Israel and Iran. The geopolitical uncertainty has rattled global markets, with oil prices surging more than 4% following this news.
The United Nations Nuclear Watchdog's Board of Governors has found Iran non-compliant with its nuclear obligations for the first time in 20 years. The resolution was passed on Thursday with 19 votes in favor, 3 against, and 11 abstentions. It urges Iran to explain uranium found at undeclared sites. Western officials say the uranium may be from secret nuclear weapons program ended in 2003. Iran called the decision political and announced plans to build a new uranium enrichment site. Meanwhile, Iran and the US are preparing for a 6th round of nuclear talks this Sunday. US President Donald Trump warned of possible strikes on Iran if diplomacy fails. Iran spared no time to react strongly to Thursday's resolution by the International Atomic Energy Agency's Board of Governors in Vienna. Iran says it will launch a new nuclear enrichment center and will also upgrade existing facilities. Our correspondent Turaj Shiralilu has more.
Iran's foreign ministry and the Nuclear Energy Organization, in a joint statement issued immediately after adoption of the IAEA resolution, said orders were issued to launch a new enrichment center at a secure location and to replace the first-generation centrifuge machines of Fordow Enrichment Center with advanced sixth-generation machines. Saying that Iran had no choice but to respond to the political resolution, the statement said other measures are also being planned and will be announced later. The UN Nuclear Watchdog's 35-nation Board of Governors, in a closed-door meeting on Thursday, passed a resolution declaring Iran in breach of its non-proliferation obligations. The resolution was proposed by the United States and the European Troika of Germany, France, and the UK. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, who is in Norway to take part in the Oslo Forum, had warned in an X message of the strategic mistake of the European Troika, vowing a strong reaction if the resolution was passed. It remains to be seen whether today's vote will negatively affect the upcoming Iran-US indirect nuclear talks scheduled for this weekend in the Omani capital, Muscat. Tehran is expected to relay its alternative proposal to Washington about nuclear enrichment and lifting of US sanctions in the upcoming talks on Sunday. Turaj Shiralilu, reporting for AUS TV, Tehran.
Astana will host the first regional energy forum, Power Central Asia plus China, along with the Central Asia-China Summit on June 16th to 17th. More than 20 strategic cooperation agreements are expected to be signed at the forum, aiming to create a solid foundation for joint projects in investment, industrial, scientific, and educational affairs. According to the organizers, the forum will help attract investment in key sectors of the economy. Turkmenistan has strongly criticized the United States' decision to impose a partial travel ban on its citizens, calling it a source of extreme misunderstanding and concern. The U.S. cited high visa overstay rates by citizens from the country. However, Ashgabat says the move is unjustified and overlooks the law-abiding nature of its travelers. In a statement issued, the Foreign Ministry described the decision as hasty and warned it could undermine growing Turkmen-America cooperation, particularly as Washington seeks to expand trade via the Caspian Middle Corridor. Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico visited Kazakhstan this week, where he met with the country's president during a two-day trip. According to the host, Astana is eager to expand exports of oil, gas and uranium to Slovakia. Our correspondent Fariza Kalimozina has more.
Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico visited Astana for talks with Kazakh President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, focusing on strengthening economic ties. In 2023, trade between Kazakhstan and Slovakia reached $140 million, with over 30 Slovak companies and 22 joint ventures active in the country. President Tokayev highlighted Kazakhstan's readiness to export oil, gas, uranium, food and more, while expanding cooperation in energy, engineering, agriculture, digitalization and tourism. He also invited Slovakia to join the Trans-Caspian International Transport Corridor project. Fico showed a particular interest in nuclear energy and oil. The visit concluded with agreements on diplomatic trading, agriculture, energy cooperation, and joint defense investments, particularly in ammunition production and modernization of Soviet-era armored vehicles. This marked Fico's second Central Asia visit during his current term, following a strategic partnership deal with Uzbekistan. Slovakia is now the third European Union's country after France and Hungary to forge such close ties in the region. Uzbekistan also seeks Slovak expertise to expand its automotive industry, aiming to double annual car production by 2030. Fico also promoted cooperation in nuclear energy and labor migration, noting Slovakia's shortage of 150,000 skilled workers in industry, automotive and healthcare. Plans are underway for a Kazakhstan-Slovakia business forum and a new strategic partnership modeled on the Uzbek agreement. Fariza Kalimurzina, A News in Almaty, Kazakhstan.
President of Kazakhstan, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, says his country is ready to boost exports of oil, gas, uranium and more to Slovakia. Speaking alongside Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico, Tokayev praised growing ties and outlined joint projects in energy, agriculture, tourism and defense. More on this subject and more. We're joined live from Tashkent, Uzbekistan by Richard Spooner, member of the Advisory Board of the Caspian Policy Center in Washington, D.C. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Kazakhstan is preparing to supply hydrocarbons and nuclear raw materials to Slovakia. How can Slovakia strategically leverage this partnership to strengthen its position in the European energy market?
Kazakhstan right now is making deals with several of the countries in Eastern Europe to increase their deliveries of oil and to begin deliveries of uranium. More or less the same process that's going on between Kazakhstan and Slovakia is taking place between Kazakhstan and Bulgaria, where the volumes are even larger and the increases have been quite dramatic over the last couple of years. I think that there is a certain sense in which Slovakia and Bulgaria are thinking together, working together in terms of developing their business with Central Asia. Both the Prime Minister of Slovakia and the President of Bulgaria are here in Tashkent at the International Investment Forum. Both of them visited Astana on their way here and made announcements about increasing trade and cooperation in other areas, even outside of trade. I noted that at the forum here in Tashkent, both the President of Bulgaria and the Prime Minister of Slovakia were very warm in their comments about developing their ties with Uzbekistan, and we saw in the visits to Astana before this forum how serious their intentions are with Kazakhstan. So it seems like right now is a time when both of these countries are drilling down on their possibilities in Central Asia with the two largest economies here.
Now, the leaders discussed cooperation across sectors, like you mentioned, from defense to digitalization. Are we seeing Kazakhstan position itself as more than just a commodities exporter?
Kazakhstan certainly is striving to become more than just a commodities exporter. That's, of course, something that takes time because you have to make deals and develop capacity to send value-added goods out as exports. Kazakhstan's economy still, as of now, runs on exports of raw materials like oil and gas and minerals, including uranium. So economic reforms and attracting investment are a priority for Kazakhstan in order to make the move that you're discussing there.
Thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure.
In Astana, the capital of Kazakhstan, the 14th General Assembly of the Parliamentary Assembly of Turkic States brought together high-level representatives of the Turkic world. Turkish Parliament Speaker Numan Kurtulmuş delivered strong remarks on global realignment, regional cooperation, and institutions' evolving role in multipolar future.
The 14th General Assembly of TurkPA convened under the chairmanship of Azerbaijan's Parliament Speaker Sahiba Gafarova, with Kazakhstan hosting the session and assuming the rotating presidency. In his speech, Turkish Grand National Assembly Speaker Numan Kurtulmuş framed the gathering within a changing global order.
The bipolar world order has already faded into history, and the unipolar system, despite all its claims, has proven unsustainable.
Kurtulmuş said the emerging multipolar structure made cooperation among Turkic states more vital than ever.
If we want to revive our civilizational march, which has been slowed down or paused for various reasons, we must walk together toward common goals, without leaving a single member of our extended family behind.
Calling the Turkic world a rising strategic force, Kurtulmuş highlighted the region's population and geopolitical leverage. He also voiced support for broadening TurkPA's membership.
We sincerely wish for Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan to join as full members as soon as possible. And we believe that the active participation of observer members like Hungary and the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus will further strengthen our unity.
The Turkish speaker described TurkPA as not just a parliamentary body, but a political engine for integration and peace. Following the session, the rotating chairmanship officially passed from Azerbaijan to Kazakhstan, while the Secretary General post was transferred from Turkey to Azerbaijan.
Azerbaijani diplomat Ramil Hassan was unanimously chosen as the new Secretary General of the Parliamentary Assembly of Turkic States, TurkPA. The election took place during the 14th plenary session of TurkPA in Astana. Hassan will officially take office on October 15, 2025. This marks his second term as Secretary General, having previously held this position from 2013 to 2019. That's all we have for now. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to A News.